Thanks, Sharon. And thanks to Josh Frydenberg, Minister for Resources. He's got a few other titles too. He joins me now. Hi, Josh.
Nice to be with you, Patricia.
The government's had some pretty ordinary weeks recently, but I reckon the last one might take the cake. Do you agree?
No, I don't. If you're implying that it was a bad week for the government, I think the economic news coming out of the recent GDP growth numbers was very positive, 3% growth, better than
you know what I'm
all the
referring
G7
to.
countries.
We had a national security leak, and the former Prime Minister quoted in the national security leak saying he was flabbergasted. Do you think that was appropriate?
Look, the Prime Minister and Malcolm Turnbull has made it very clear that the former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, is entitled to speak his mind, and he encourages him to continue to do so. But where the record needs to be corrected, Malcolm Turnbull will also do so, and I think that's a fair position.
Is this the sort of situation that you predicted when you backed Tony Abbott instead of Malcolm Turnbull, that you were worried about these kinds of divisions?
Look, I made my decision in the ballot last year.
But was this in your consideration, that when you have an ex-Prime Minister like this sitting on the backbench that this sort of thing happens?
Look, I'm not going to go into what my considerations were or were not, other than to say Malcolm Turnbull was overwhelmingly elected by the party room. I think he's made a very strong start as Prime Minister. We've seen very positive announcements about innovation, the continued rollout of our infrastructure spending proposals, the good GDP numbers, the good job creation numbers. Of course, we've made an announcement recently about media law changes. The agenda is busy and things are happening. What goes on between Malcolm Turnbull and Tony Abbott may interest the media, and it may also interest some of the scribes.
And some of the public too, wouldn't you say?
No, I don't.
Are you saying really the public's not interested in seeing divisions between a former Prime Minister and the new one?
Well, can I say, whenever you change political leaders on both sides of the political divide, whether it's in government or in opposition, it's a seismic event. Now, a lot is written about that, but it really is for people inside the Beltway, the political aficionados, the media who get interested by that. The people out there who vote for us to get elected to the Parliament in the first place, they're more worried about the issues that will affect their mortgage, that will affect congestion on the roads, that will affect the quality of health and education and defence of our nation.
Do you trust that Tony Abbott will stop intervening?
Look, I think Tony Abbott will speak his mind on the issues that are important to him.
Do you think it's likely we'll hear more from him?
Well, look, Tony Abbott made very clear just a few days ago that the overwhelming priority for him and for the government is obviously to get re-elected and to ensure that Bill Shorten doesn't make it to the Lodge. And I think Tony Abbott will stick to that commitment. Have
you read some of the extracts of Nikki Savva's book?
I've seen a few of the headlines. I can't claim to have read.
Oh, you must have read something. You're under oath.
So, hold the Bible and repeat after me. Look, can I just say, I haven't actually read any of the extracts in length. I've just seen the headlines. I've obviously seen a few of the stories, and they're again a distraction.
Well, they certainly are a distraction. But either way, is this because there hasn't been a reconciliation? There's still so many people briefing journalists that they can write a book like this.
Look, Patricia, as you know, both sides of the political divide have seen changes in leaders in recent years. That's led to quite tumultuous events. People want to get their version of events on the record, and that is why you see these books being written. But obviously, they're a major story one day, they're not a major story the next.
How about this allegation that everyone thought there was an affair between the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister at the time? Did you think that?
I certainly didn't.
What do you think of people talking about it? Do you think it's appropriate?
I think it's a bit inappropriate, to be honest.
Why?
Because I don't think it happened. And I think that people understood that the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister had a close relationship. It was at the centre of government, but to write up that sort of innuendo and make those sort of allegations when there is no basis for doing so, I think is mischievous and extreme.
Is one of the reasons people are writing about it, though, that the impression meant that they felt that there was an unusual power relationship between Tony Abbott and Peter Credlin. They couldn't communicate with that office. Isn't that part of the issue?
People will write about it because they're journalists and they want to sell books or sell newspapers, and I can understand that. That fits their brief. As to whether...
Nikki Savva said she wants to give voice to the people who didn't have a voice during that time. You don't believe her?
Well, that's very kind of Nikki to do that.
You don't believe her?
Well, you know, that might be Nikki's motivation. She may also have other motivations, but that's for Nikki. And like, I don't begrudge her in the slightest. She's a journalist writing those stories. But I don't think that we should be filling our discussion tonight talking about the future of our country based on a relationship, a political relationship, a working relationship that took place between a Prime Minister and a Chief of Staff that now is behind us. What's in front of us is how Malcolm Turnbull is going to deliver for the Australian people, so much so that Bill Shorten won't get his chance in the lodge.
Okay, let me help you with that, because I've got some policy questions. I can't help myself.
Thank goodness.
I like policy. It's not my fault there's new books coming out that I have to ask about. First, on taxation policy. When are we going to see your policy? And do you think there are excesses in negative gearing?
Look, we've said we'll talk about the details of our tax policy as we get closer to the budget. They're issues for Scott Morrison and the Prime Minister to articulate, and you'll see that in due course.
Do you think there are excesses in negative gearing?
As for negative gearing, again, that's one element of our policy that we have not yet finalised as to, you know, what will be taking place or not taking place within negative gearing. What we do know is that the Labor Party has a terrible policy which will, you know, create loss of jobs.
So are there excesses in negative gearing in your view?
Look, I'm not going to get into the excesses.
You don't have a view?
You know, David Spears had this view, had this debate going with Matthias Cormann the other day, which went, you know, back and forth.
It was fantastic viewing.
Was it?
David's fantastic.
What happened to the ratings? I don't know.
I don't know. But okay, so you don't want to give a view on negative gearing. That's what I'm getting here.
Well, I want to give a view that the Labor Party's policy is not the right policy.
Do you agree with Tony Abbott? He spoke in the party room, said don't touch negative gearing. Do you agree with him?
Look, Tony Abbott made an intervention in the Parliament, and the key message there was that Malcolm Turnbull has destroyed the Labor Party's policy on negative gearing.
Another question before we get to your portfolio. I've got a couple of questions. No. Well, I did tell you I was going to talk to you about other politics as well. On same-sex marriage, this morning George Brandis said we're going to have this plebiscite by the end of the year. Yeah. You're a well-known supporter of same-sex marriage. You've made that clear. Should it be by the end of the year? Because Malcolm Turnbull's office has issued a statement saying perhaps it won't be by the end of the year.
Well, the government is absolutely committed to a plebiscite as soon as possible after an election. But at the same time, we don't know the date for the election. Many dates have been speculated upon, but the date is the prerogative of the Prime Minister. Now, it might be possible to do one this year, but it would depend on the timing of the election. I know that the Prime Minister is absolutely committed to doing it as soon as possible. And the question, Patricia, is for the Labor Party. Again, do they want to make the politics of this issue first and foremost the centre of attention, or do they actually want to get the best possible outcome for the people who would like to see same-sex marriage legislated in our Parliament?
On your portfolio, the federal government has a short list of 6 sites for a nuclear waste facility, low level. I know that you had quite a few representatives come to protest about that, and they've complained that you didn't meet with them. Why didn't you meet with them?
Look, we've got an extensive process of consultation going, and for your viewers just to understand that Australia's been looking for a repository, a single national repository for low-level and intermediate waste for half a century. Low-level waste is the goggles and the gloves, the test tubes that may come into contact with nuclear medicine, and intermediate waste is the reprocessed rods from our Lucas Heights reactor. Now, it's stored at around 100 different sites around the country. You could be driving past one of those universities or hospitals on the way to work tonight. But the point is we want it in one single site, just like they've done in the United Kingdom, in France, in Spain, and in other jurisdictions. So we have called for voluntary nominations. We got 28. We've now got it down to 6. My senior officials have been holding public forums and extensive meetings.
I think that consultation ends this week, is that right?
That's exactly right. Now, we've made a point that as the Minister, I haven't been meeting with groups that are for or against. So I thought it was only appropriate that if a group who were vehemently against came to Canberra, I wouldn't see them, just as if I wouldn't see a group that were vehemently for, and there are plenty of those who also came to Canberra.
Can I ask you this? We're having this other debate with the Royal Commission in South Australia, and I know the Chief Scientist has said he thinks the idea of a nuclear facility there not one that's not low waste, that is feasible. Is this debate over just trying to find a site for a low-level one showing you that it's impossible to create a nuclear future for South Australia or Australia?
Well, of the 6 sites that we narrowed down for this low-level and intermediate waste, 3 are in South Australia. And we've noticed a real change in public opinion on this issue. And Jay Weatherall, who's from the left of the Labor Party, has actually been pretty brave, I think, in putting on the table the Royal Commission. And he has helped change the debate in South Australia. Now, the South Australian economy has a few challenges. Unemployment is the highest state at the highest level in the nation if you look on a state-by-state basis. So they are looking for new forms of revenue, and one of the potential new forms of revenue is to store high-level waste from overseas. Now, Kevin Scarce's Royal Commission, Patricia, has said that could produce 5,000 jobs and a $5 billion annual dividend to that local economy. That's a pretty enticing paycheck, if you like. So I think it's only fair that this issue is looked at in detail. The final report is out in May. This was an interim report. And I've said it will be a brave federal government that stood in the way of a state government that had a broad-based community consensus in favour of storing high-level waste in their particular state.
Josh, we've run out of time, but James Patterson got the #1 Senate spot for Victoria for the Liberal Party.
And Jane Hume got the #3.
And under the new Senate reforms, will Jane make it too?
I'm very hopeful that both will get elected, and both are excellent candidates and both bring to the table a deep well of experience in their various fields.
Thank you so much.
Great to be with you.
And that's Josh Frydenberg there joining us. Well, we got to his policies. Now, I was joined to